The Spinosaurus problem. Why the Ice Age never produced a river monster like this. Most people assume that the Pleistocene was just a smaller, colder version of today. That the animals were brutal, yes, but fundamentally similar in how they hunted, how they lived, how they ruled their world. There is a reason that assumption is wrong, and it has almost nothing to do with size. Here is the secret I want to share with you by the end of this video. The Ice Age never needed a river monster, because the giants of North America evolved something far stranger, a survival strategy that aquatic predators could never match. Stay with me, because explaining why that matters is exactly why this channel exists. If you are new here, subscribe right now so you never miss one of these deep dives. And before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment below telling me which Pleistocene predator scares you the most. Is it the dire wolf, the saber-tooth cat, or something we have not even covered yet? Your answer helps me know which giants deserve their own full episode next. Hold on, this part is crucial, and I need your full attention for a second. Everything I am about to explain connects to a resource we have created specifically for people who want to go deeper into how these creatures actually functioned. Our complete guide on Ice Age predator behavior and ecological strategy is available in the description and pinned in the top comment. It is a paid resource, but it contains the mechanisms that make this video make sense. If you want to understand not just what happened, but why it happened, that guide is where those answers live. Now here is what most documentaries get wrong about the Pleistocene. They treat aquatic and terrestrial predators as though they occupy different universes. A saber-tooth hunted on land, a crocodile hunted in water. Never the two shall meet. But that is not what happened in Ice Age North America. The largest predators of the epoch never developed into river monsters because the landscape itself made that strategy obsolete. The Pleistocene was not the wet, forested, river-dominated world that the Spinosaurus inhabited in Cretaceous Africa. North America during the last Ice Age, particularly between roughly 25,000 and 12,000 years ago, was dominated by something far different: expansive grasslands, sparse vegetation, and prey animals that had evolved to exploit open terrain. Mammoths and mastodons roamed in herds across continental prairies. Giant ground sloths browsed in scattered forests. Bison and camels moved in vast numbers across what is now the Great Plains. All of that prey was on land. All of it. A predator adapted to hunting in rivers would have starved. The thermoregulatory burden of maintaining body heat in cold water during the Pleistocene would have been catastrophic. Crocodilians survived ice ages only in warmer climates with stable water temperatures. North America offered neither. So what evolved instead was something that seems less exotic than a river monster, but was arguably more effective: the mega predator built for pursuit on open ground. Dire wolves did not wait for prey to come to water. They chased it across hundreds of miles of open terrain. Saber-tooth cats did not rely on concealment in murky depths. They ambushed from ridgelines where visibility stretched for miles. The saber-tooth, frankly, was a specialist in a world where prey had nowhere to hide. That is the inverse of the Spinosaurus strategy. The river monster waits in darkness. The Pleistocene apex predator pursued in daylight, across land that offered no mercy. This distinction matters more than it might seem, because it reveals something about how predators actually respond to their environment. Evolution does not produce novelty for its own sake. A species does not evolve the ability to hunt in water just because water exists. It evolves to hunt in water because the prey is there and the competitors are not. In Ice Age North America, the prey was never in the water in sufficient quantities to justify that adaptation. So North America never produced a river monster. It produced something else entirely. The most successful terrestrial predator guild in Pleistocene history. The saber-tooth was not just an oversized cat with bigger teeth. Every structural element of its skeleton was reorganized around the demands of bringing down prey that could weigh 10 tons or more. The forelimbs were extraordinarily powerful, not for running, but for controlling a mammoth's leg or pulling down a mastodon. The spine was rigid, locked for stability rather than flexibility. The bite itself was positioned to deliver maximum force to the throat and abdomen, not to crush bone. That is an animal engineered with precision for a specific task, stopping a land mammal twice its size. A river hunter like the Spinosaurus faced a completely different set of constraints. It needed to be buoyant, it needed hydrodynamic efficiency, it needed jaws built to grasp slippery prey and a body that could move through viscous water. Those requirements are almost mutually exclusive with what a Pleistocene land predator needed to survive. This is the paradox no one talks about. The Spinosaurus is celebrated as more exotic than the tyrant lizard of the Cretaceous. But aquatic specialization is actually the more conservative evolutionary choice, less demanding than what the Pleistocene demanded. In a world of open grasslands and fast-moving megafauna, a predator had to be faster, had to be more intelligent, had to hunt in coordinated groups. A river monster waits. A Pleistocene pack hunts. North America during the last glacial maximum was nothing like the Cretaceous rivers where Spinosaurus ruled. The climate was brutal, unpredictable. Temperatures swung violently between seasons. Prey animals weren't confined to river systems. They ranged across tundra, grassland, and boreal forest. A predator that depended on water, that needed a river to hunt, would have starved for half the year. The great predators that actually dominated this continent, the dire wolf, the short-faced bear, the saber-tooth cat, they evolved the exact opposite strategy. They became nomadic, they followed the prey, they developed intelligence that allowed them to coordinate kills across open ground where you cannot hide, where you cannot ambush from water. Those adaptations won them 200,000 years of dominance. A river monster would have lasted a season. This is the fundamental problem the Spinosaurus never had to face. Egypt's fossil record preserved a stable ecosystem. The Nile existed then much as it exists now. Rivers were reliable food sources, but the Pleistocene glacial cycle created something far more savage. It created scarcity, it created migration, it created arms races that water-dependent predators cannot win. Look at the fossil record itself. The La Brea tar pits in modern-day Los Angeles preserve the skeleton of an entire Ice Age ecosystem trapped in asphalt. Over 40,000 years, more than 2.000 individuals have been excavated from that single site. More dire wolves than any other large carnivore. That abundance reflects a simple ecological truth. They worked. They hunted together. They brought down massive prey as coordinated units. Hold on, this is the moment I need to pull you aside for something crucial. The survival mechanisms of these Ice Age predators weren't random. They followed patterns, hierarchies of hunting strategy and social structure that shaped which animals lived and which disappeared. If you want to understand the full architecture of why these creatures succeeded where others failed, why Pleistocene North America produced the most formidable predators in this continent's history, our complete guide breaks down those patterns, those social mechanisms, those evolutionary pressures in a depth you simply won't find anywhere else. It's available in the description and pinned in the top comment. It's a paid resource, but it rewires how you see Pleistocene predation entirely. The saber-tooth cat was different, solitary, ambush-based, but equally adapted to Pleistocene constraints. Its enormous canines evolved not because of some random mutation, but because of a specific prey problem. Ice Age megafauna, like ground sloths and juvenile mammoths, had incredibly thick hide, dense muscle tissue. You needed piercing weapons, not slashing ones. You needed a predator that could deliver devastating damage in the first seconds of contact, because these prey animals could fight back with lethal force. That is fundamentally different from a river predator's world. Spinosaurus hunted fish and the occasional dinosaur that came to drink. It didn't face an arms race. It didn't need to because its prey had nowhere to run. The water was its arena. Escape meant swimming away, and the Spinosaurus was built to chase swimmers. But here is what most paleontologists overlooked for decades. The absence of a Spinosaurus-like predator in the Pleistocene fossil record isn't bad luck. It isn't because the right mutations never happened. It's because aquatic specialization was a liability, an evolutionary dead end. The continental environment of North America simply did not reward the traits that made Spinosaurus successful. A creature that required deep water, that hunted based on aquatic stalking, could not adapt to a world where prey followed seasonal migration routes across hundreds of miles. It could not compete with pack hunters. It could not match the intelligence required to track mobile megafauna across changing terrain. The Pleistocene didn't produce a river monster because the Pleistocene had already evolved past them. That distinction matters. It tells us something profound about ecological strategy itself. The Pleistocene megafauna of North America operated under a completely different set of evolutionary pressures than the Cretaceous river systems of North Africa. Here, mobility was survival. Territory was measured in hundreds of miles, not in the length of a river channel. The animals that succeeded were those built for pursuit, for endurance, for reading the landscape across seasons and years. A saber-tooth cat didn't ambush prey from the shallows. It stalked across grasslands, sometimes traveling miles before striking. Dire wolves didn't depend on a fixed water source to hunt. They followed prey migrations, adapted to shifting food sources, operated in packs that required constant communication and coordination. These strategies demanded a predator that was lean, responsive, intelligent, not a semi-aquatic specialist anchored to a river system. Mammoths themselves tell this story. They were not built for water. Their massive bodies, their dense fur, their huge energy requirements, all of these traits made sense for creatures that had to survive the cold while covering enormous distances in search of vegetation. A mammoth trapped in a river system, dependent on aquatic hunting or aquatic stalking, would have been as helpless as a moose in a desert. The same logic applied to mastodons, to ground sloths, to every major herbivore of the Ice Age. They were distance travelers, seasonal migrants, creatures adapted to open or semi-open environments where they could graze and browse across vast territories. Their predators evolved specifically to hunt them in that context. Now, before we continue, I need you to focus on something crucial here. The reason this matters is that we often assume predatory success comes down to pure size or power, teeth, claws, raw force. But the fossil record tells a different story entirely. There's a far more comprehensive exploration of how predatory strategy shaped the entire Pleistocene ecosystem, how pack hunting evolved, how intelligence replaced raw strength, how environmental constraints determined which body plans could survive, and all of that is covered in our complete guide on Ice Age predators. You can find it in the description and pinned in the top comment. It's a paid resource, but it goes much deeper into the mechanisms that separated successful predators from extinct ones. Size meant nothing without strategy. Power meant nothing without prey that could be caught. And prey in the Pleistocene was not waiting passively in rivers, it was running. Consider what a semi-aquatic apex predator would actually require to survive in Ice Age North America. First, it would need permanent access to deep water, rivers or lakes that remained open year-round and contained sufficient prey to sustain a body weighing several tons. North American Pleistocene waterways simply did not support that level of aquatic biomass. The most productive freshwater ecosystems we have fossil evidence for supported fish, some large aquatic reptiles in warmer regions, and waterfowl. None of that adds up to enough food for a creature the size of a Spinosaurus. Second, such a predator would be absolutely vulnerable on land. Movement across the terrain would be clumsy, inefficient. Any herbivore encountering such a creature away from water would simply run. Escape was easy. The megafauna of the Pleistocene did not evolve in an environment where a slow, water-dependent predator posed any real threat. Third, and perhaps most importantly, a river-bound predator cannot respond to seasonal scarcity. When food becomes scarce in one region, mobile predators migrate. they follow their prey. A creature locked to a river system, unable to move efficiently across land, would starve when local prey populations crashed. And in the Pleistocene, local prey populations crashed regularly. Ice advances forced migrations, vegetation patterns shifted with climate cycles, survival demanded flexibility. The saber-tooth cats, the dire wolves, the short-faced bears, they all solved this problem the same way. They moved. They hunted across open terrain, across changing landscapes, across seasons. They developed the neurological capacity to track prey over long distances, to remember migration routes, to coordinate in groups. Those traits, accumulated over thousands of generations, created predators perfectly adapted to their world. A Spinosaurus, by contrast, would have been a catastrophic evolutionary investment. All of its specialized aquatic adaptations, the paddle-like tail, the streamlined body, the fish-eating dentition, would have become liabilities in a continental environment. Natural selection would not have favored such a creature, and so one never evolved. This is the real distinction between the Pleistocene megafauna of North America and what Spinosaurus represented in the Cretaceous. The Ice Age carnivores were not locked into a single ecological niche. They were generalists forced to adapt rapidly or perish. A mammoth herd could adjust its migration route by 50 miles if seasonal rains failed. A saber-tooth cat had to hunt successfully whether prey was plentiful or scarce. There was no stable ecosystem waiting for specialized monsters. The Spinosaurus problem, when you strip away all the paleontological jargon, is really a problem of environmental stability. That creature thrived in a world where riverine systems remained relatively predictable for millions of years. The Kem-Kem formation where it hunted was a green, warm, watery landscape that changed only slowly. Fish populations could sustain a 17-meter apex predator because those fish had nowhere else to go. The river was their world. It was also Spinosaurus's world. North America, during the last glacial maximum, 13,000 years ago, was nothing like that. The climate shifted every few centuries. Megafauna had to migrate or die. A predator that spent its entire evolutionary history perfecting aquatic hunting would find itself stranded in a landscape of grasslands and shrublands, far from permanent bodies of water. Its paddle tail would be useless. Its long snout, designed for snapping at fish, would be poorly equipped for subduing terrestrial prey. Its forelimbs, possibly useful for swimming, would be nearly vestigial for terrestrial locomotion. Hold on, I need you to focus for a moment here. Because this connects directly to something most people misunderstand about extinction. We tend to think that Ice Age megafauna vanished because they were slow, or stupid, or too big to sustain themselves. The real story is more precise. They vanished because they were too specialized for a world that stopped being stable. And the detailed mechanisms behind that collapse, the climate-driven prey shifts, the cascade failures in predator-prey relationships, the way thermoregulation worked in smaller and smaller populations, that is all mapped out in the comprehensive guide available in the description and pinned in the top comment. It is a paid resource, but it contains the exact pathways through which specialized megafauna fail when their environment changes faster than evolution can respond. So imagine being a predator that evolved to hunt in warm rivers. Your entire body is an argument for that world. Your metabolism is tuned for it. Your hunting strategy presupposes it. Your digestive system assumes fish. Then, over the course of 500 years, a blink in geological time, the climate shifts. Those rivers become seasonal. They freeze. The fish populations collapse or migrate to regions your kind cannot follow. Your specialized anatomy, the product of 3 million years of refinement, becomes a liability. The saber-tooth cats faced the opposite problem, but the principle was identical. They were generalists. They could hunt large terrestrial prey through varied terrain. When climate shifted, they shifted with it. Their intelligence, their pack coordination, their ability to track prey across open country, These were adaptive advantages in an unstable world. They were built for change. A Spinosaurus transported to the Pleistocene would have faced extinction within a few centuries, not because it was weak, not because it lacked intelligence, but because it was the wrong tool for the world. The Ice Age had no room for river monsters. It required adaptable hunters, thick-furred megafauna that could endure seasonal extremes, and prey populations flexible enough to shift geography with the climate. That entire ecosystem was built on flexibility. And this brings us to the deepest layer of the problem. Evolution does not design creatures for the world as it might be. It designs them for the world as it is. A Spinosaurus was a perfect predator for the early Cretaceous world it inhabited. But had that creature's lineage somehow survived to the Pleistocene, natural selection would have dismantled it. Every specialized adaptation would have become a burden. The species would have dwindled. Shorter-faced bears, dire wolves, and saber-tooth cats would have outcompeted it ruthlessly. The real reason the Ice Age never produced a river monster like Spinosaurus is because the Ice Age's climate made riverine specialization a losing strategy. Aquatic predators could not migrate as rapidly as the climate demanded. They could not shift prey preferences quickly enough. They could not thermoregulate as effectively in variable conditions. They were, in essence, locked into an ecological commitment that the world no longer honored. This is the Spinosaurus problem inverted. Not a monster too strange for its world, but a world too hostile for the monsters that had evolved to dominate calm waters. The terrestrial giants of the Pleistocene possessed something no river predator could match: flexibility. A woolly mammoth could strip bark from dwarf willows on the steppe one season and migrate hundreds of miles to exploit fresh grazing grounds the next. A dire wolf pack could abandon a depleted elk population and pursue bison across entirely new territories. Saber-tooth cats adapted their hunting strategies seasonally, targeting different prey as herds shifted with the climate. Spinosaurus, locked to its rivers, could not do any of this. Imagine you were a semi-aquatic predator in Pleistocene North America. You evolved in Miocene times, let us say, when the continent's interior possessed warm, meandering river systems teeming with fish, crocodilians, and aquatic mammals. You became the apex of that water-bound world. Your teeth, your snout, your limbs, everything about you was optimized for hunting in rivers. Then the climate shifts. Gradually, the warming and cooling cycles intensify. Seasonal swings become more extreme. Rivers freeze solid for months. They become dynamic death traps, their channels shifting violently with glacial melt. The megafauna that once depended on aquatic prey disperse onto grasslands. Your food source vanishes. Now you face a choice evolution cannot negotiate. Adapt to a terrestrial existence and compete with predators that have spent millions of years perfecting that strategy. Or cling to your riverine niche and starve. This is precisely where the fossil record becomes instructive. When we examine the predator ecology of North America during the Ice Age, we find no semi-aquatic apex carnivore, no river monster. We find instead a carefully partitioned system of terrestrial specialists. The saber-tooth cat, built for ambush and power. The dire wolf, built for endurance and pack coordination. The short-faced bear, built for raw strength and omnivorous adaptability. Each occupied a distinct hunting niche. Each could migrate, each could shift prey preference, and critically, each left extensive fossil evidence across the continent, not clustered in valleys but distributed across vast regions. Hold on, I need to pause here for something important. The deeper patterns behind why Pleistocene megafauna succeeded where aquatic specialists failed, the ecological mechanics, the thermoregulatory advantages, the full picture of prey availability and seasonal migration corridors. These are the threads I unpack completely in the deep dive guide available in the description and pinned in the top comment. That resource walks through the actual data, the predator-prey models, and the climate reconstruction that explains why this continent could support a Columbian mammoth but never a river apex predator. The saber-tooth cat, Smilodon populator, dominated its niche for nearly 1 million years. Fossil evidence from the La Brea tar pits and other sites across the American Southwest reveals a predator exquisitely adapted to the specific prey landscape of its time. Its massive forelimbs could immobilize large herbivores. Its iconic canines could deliver a killing bite to exposed throat and belly. But here is what often gets overlooked. The saber-tooth was not a generalist. It specialized ruthlessly in large prey, ground sloths, camels, young mammoths, horses. When megafaunal diversity began declining toward the end of the Pleistocene, roughly 13,000 years ago, the saber-tooth faced a cascading collapse in available prey. Its niche was so tightly defined that when the herbivores it hunted disappeared, the predator had no fallback strategy. A river specialist would have faced the same problem magnified. The moment aquatic megafauna became scarce, the entire hunting strategy became obsolete. The real diversity of the Ice Age predator world lies in this specialization, not in monstrous aberrations but in precision. Each predator was a tool finely honed for a specific ecological task. The dire wolf hunted medium-sized prey in coordinated packs. The short-faced bear pursued solitary large prey with overwhelming strength. The American lion, larger than any modern big cat, occupied yet another niche, and none of them required water. This is perhaps the central insight about why North America's Pleistocene never produced anything like Spinosaurus. The continent's climate, prey distribution, and seasonal volatility simply did not reward specialization in a single medium. They rewarded adaptability, mobility, the ability to shift strategy within a generation or two. Spinosaurus emerged in a world of permanent warmth and stable, predictable rivers. The Ice Age North America was neither warm nor stable. It was a landscape of rapid environmental oscillation, of mammoth herds that migrated hundreds of miles annually, of prey availability that could fluctuate wildly over decades. A river monster could not follow those herds. It could not pursue prey across grasslands or through forests. It was fundamentally, geographically static. The terrestrial apex predators, by contrast, were geographic nomads. And that is the secret I promised you at the beginning. Spinosaurus was not impossible because of its size, or its anatomy, or even its hunting strategy. Spinosaurus was impossible because of what North America actually was. A river monster needs stability. It needs predictable hydrology, consistent water temperatures, dependable prey populations in the same place year after year. Spinosaurus evolved in the Cretaceous rivers of North Africa because those rivers existed. They flowed reliably. They supported their own distinct ecosystems. A predator that mastered that niche could dominate it for millions of years. The Ice Age North America, by contrast, was constantly remaking itself. The Pleistocene was an era of oscillation, warming phases that brought forests northward and opened grasslands, cooling phases that expanded the ice sheets and compressed habitable zones. These shifts happened fast enough that they mattered to animals, with lifespans measured in decades. A predator that locked itself into a single river system would starve the moment that system changed. And in the Pleistocene, every river system changed. Dire wolves roamed hundreds of miles. Saber-tooth cats followed their prey across multiple ecological zones. Even the ground sloths, despite their bulk, shifted their ranges seasonally. They had to. Their survival depended on reading the landscape, on moving when it moved, on finding prey wherever it relocated. A river monster cannot do that. By definition, it is bound to water, and in the Ice Age, water was not a constant. It was a variable. It contracted and expanded with the climate. Rivers that flowed with abundance in one century could be reduced to trickles in the next. Lakes disappeared. Wetlands became grasslands. The specialized aquatic predator would find itself stranded, watching from the water's edge as the ecosystem it depended on simply evaporated. This is what the fossil record actually tells us. The most successful large carnivores of the Pleistocene were the generalists. The animals that could hunt in forests, across grasslands, in mixed ecosystems. The predators that did not require a specific geography, a specific climate zone, a specific prey base. They survived because they were willing to move, because they could adapt their hunting strategies to whatever prey was available, because they did not gamble everything on a single stable niche. Spinosaurus was a masterpiece of specialization. It was evolution solving a specific problem with extraordinary precision. It was the perfect predator for a perfect niche, and that perfection was also its fragility. The moment the world changed, the moment those rivers became less reliable, the moment the prey base shifted, Spinosaurus had nowhere else to go. It had optimized itself into a corner. North America's Pleistocene megafauna learned a different lesson. They learned that the world would always change. That specialization, while tempting, was a gamble. That survival belonged to the flexible, the mobile, the adaptable. They built themselves to be survivors in an unstable world. The Ice Age never needed a river monster, because the Ice Age was too dynamic, too volatile, too unpredictable for any single niche to remain viable for long. The greatest predators that North America ever produced were not masters of one world. They were wanderers in many. That flexibility, that restlessness, that refusal to be bound by geography, that is what allowed them to thrive when everything else was falling apart. Thank you for watching Ice Age Titans. If this exploration of how the Pleistocene shaped its giants made you curious, I'd love to hear which Ice Age predator you think was most perfectly adapted to North America's unstable world. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode about the creatures that ruled this continent long before us.